So following a high-profile career both in criminal justice and the public service, he brings really valuable experience to his new role as the Police and Crime Commissioner for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. When I knew him in '83, he was a criminal law barrister, prosecuting and defending Leicester Bar at the Leicester Bar for 25 years. He was elected councillor on the City Council and Harborough District Councils. And during this time, he also has served as Mayor of Lutterworth. He was created a life peer in 1998 and also served as a Justice Minister and more recently as Shadow Attorney General and Shadow Legal Aid Minister, a role he resigned upon his election as Police and Crime Commissioner. Other parliamentary appointments include Parliamentary Under Secretary at DEFRA and the Ministry of Defence. And I used to meet Willy on the train regularly going up and down to London. So welcome, Willy.
Thank you. We've heard a lot already today about how things haven't got any better in the last 40 years. I'm going to get something off my chest straight away. I think we've heard yesterday about how things would get a good deal worse than they were 40 years ago. We're meeting a day after the new Home Secretary says it's possible that as a result of Brexit, in order to go across the Channel to France or to Europe, that you may need a visa, or if you don't need a visa, you may have to pay a fee. How absurd is that in 2016? How backward is that in 2016? Thank you for letting me get that off my chest. I'm not going to speak about Brexit again, I promise you. It's a great invitation. Thank you very much for the invitation, Surinder. And it's a privilege to be asked to speak at your AGM. I've grown up, rather like Surinder, with TREC in all its previous names, having arrived in Leicester as a pretty young lawyer only 5 years after the Leicester Council for Community Relations was formed. I've also grown up, as Surinder was kind enough to say, with your chair anyway, who's been a friend for a long time, and we were colleagues on Leicester City Council, and who is now, I'm sure you know this, after many, many years of fantastic expert help and support to many, many people and to government too, the High Sheriff of Leicestershire.
Oh, congratulations.
I wasn't sure that would get a clap, but it did. I've seen quite a lot of him since I was elected in May, and I can tell you, and you won't be surprised to hear this, that Vijay and Surinder are doing a fantastic job. But what I want to point out, and I think Surinder would agree, that he is not your typical High Sheriff of Leicestershire, which is something that goes back, God, 1,000 years or something, and normally comes from a different area. But how refreshing that he is not, and he has given this new role a huge new impetus. In other words, he does the sort of thing that you don't expect High Sheriffs of Leicestershire to do. One example, I think, is to be chair of the Race Equality Centre, and the other is for him to be a major part of a walk to raise funds for pro bono legal advice in the city a few months ago. So he's doing a fantastic job in that capacity, and he's showing a different approach, and one in keeping, I would like to think, with modern Britain and modern Leicester. Now, I first met Iris only in April this year, seems like a lifetime ago, when TREC, when she held a hustings for the Police and Crime Commissioner elections. Iris was really in the chair for that session and was responsible for the question and answer session. She was brilliant, of course, but I don't think I've ever been more terrified. Her questioning, or more significantly perhaps, her querying of answers to questions, made Jeremy Paxman look soft. TREC is indeed lucky, I think, to have a chief executive and a chair like Iris and Serinda. Now let me tell you a little about myself, in fact Serinda's really taken this part from me, and then perhaps rather more interestingly, something about my role as Police and Crime Commissioner for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. I came up to Leicester in 1972 as a young barrister, worked for many, many years in that field of law, the field of criminal law, working for both in the city and around the East Midlands, working from chambers just down the road from here. I did prosecute, I did defend, I mostly defended, which I'm glad about. I was very politically active. I was on the City Council for 11 years. For a wonderful old ward, St Margaret's Ward. How many of you have ever heard of St Margaret's Ward? An amazing place. It went from Hinckley Road all the way across to Belgrave Road, including Newfound Pool, Tudor Road, parts of St Matthew's Phase 1, the city centre, all now gone. I was a parliamentary candidate, failed, and a councillor in very, very Tory Harborough District Council. And then in 1998 my life changed. They wanted more people to be Labour peers because the majority, before hereditary peers disappeared from the House of Lords, they wanted, the Labour government quite naturally wanted to win some votes in the House of Lords. So I was asked to do that, and it changed my life. And I was fortunate enough to be a minister in a number of departments. But one of the real changes in my life came after Labour were kicked out in 2010, and I was a Justice Shadow Minister in the House of Lords when the Legal Aid Bill, the LASPO Bill, now the LASPO Act, went through Parliament. I happen to think that that is one of the worst, if not the worst, of the pieces of legislation that awful coalition government passed. And I hope there's some Liberal Democrats in the room. I hope so. I'm sure there may be. But if you are one, you would be ashamed of what your party did on that. And if you're not ashamed, you should be, because that act has done more, I think, in a quiet way, no publicity, none of the press that you were talking about, been very interested in it at all, to make it more difficult for poor people, whatever their colour, whatever their creed, to get the rights that there were under our system, which was to advise on the whole issues of social welfare law, whether it be housing, whether it be debt, whether it be welfare benefits, whether it be immigration. All those gone because legal aid was just removed like that from it. I'll come back to that a bit in the end, if I may, but I led the opposition with lots of others in the Lords. We had a lot of victories, but governments get their way. And this terrible piece of legislation is now on our books and doing untold harm day after day. And I'm so delighted that this organisation, your organisation, is attached and interested in social welfare law, and Val and all the other groups that are doing such a good job in Leicester. And then eventually, and rather just to my surprise, I was elected as the Police and Crime Commissioner this May. And I want to just spend a little time, if I may, telling you a bit about what a Police and Crime Commissioner does. Now, we're not appointed, I've already made it clear, we're elected by the electorate of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And I want to just set you a test, if I may. How many of you voted on May the 5th this year in that, I'm not asking you how you voted, please. Did you vote in that election? Some people weren't out of principle, and that's fair enough. But how many voted in this room? In this room? I wanted to find out whether Serinda had voted. That's a kind of, that's about 75–80%. In Leicester City, 25% voted, and that was after some real targeting of votes. And in the county, less than 20% voted. So this is an elected job on the basis of just about 20% of people voting. It makes me think actually. You know, I'm not going around boasting that this is an elected job. I say it when I need to, but actually 20% is 20%. What kind of democracy is that? And that's because this job is really, what it does is unknown. It was invented by the coalition government in 2011. It was an idea that Conservatives picked up in opposition from America. They thought it sounded good, and instead of police committees, which weren't perfect, to be honest, they decided that one elected individual should have their power over policing matters. Were they right? Were they wrong? It's much too early to say. What is our job? Our most important job is to act as the bridge, the link between the public, that's you, and the police, to be the voice of the public for issues around policing and community safety. First elections were in November 2012, when my predecessor, a guy called Clive Loader, was elected. The role has sort of grown a bit. I have responsibility for commissioning services for victims of crime now, and closer working with the other forces that there are in the East Midlands, particularly, as I say, those in our region. Now, you can guess with the title, with the police from the title, but a lot of people are unsure about the and crime element. What's that got to do with me? Or what does commissioning mean? Crime sees me working with our partners in the local authorities, the community safety partnerships, and the third sector, charities, not-for-profit organisations, community interest companies, to do what I can to prevent people from becoming victims of crime, to support people out of the cycle of reoffending, and to join up community safety services with the criminal justice system so it all works together. But what is in my mind at all times, or I hope it is that the majority of crime is committed against all people. Everyone suffers from crime, but I think sometimes the system forgets the real victims of crime, and it is why victims need to be protected, particularly are people who are poor and have little, and not those who are rich and have a lot. I hold the overall police budget for Leicestershire Police. I set that in due course in consultation with the Chief Constable, who has responsibility for managing the force within that budget. I have some funds from the Home Office, which is used to contract organisations to deliver specific services to improve community safety, and I have some money with which I can fund smaller organisations who provide a valuable support service. The Ministry of Justice provides me some money to fund services for victims. I suppose if people were asked what they know most about whatever a PCC, a Police Crime Commissioner, does, it is the power to fire a Chief Constable. Now, that's not on my agenda, I have to tell you tonight. Much as I would like to take such a revolutionary act, it's not on my agenda. The first lot of PCCs who got elected around the country, there were one or two, I don't quite know how to describe them, power-crazy idiots who thought it would be exciting just to fire the Chief Constable, whether he or she was good or not so good. And that was a great thrill, I'm sure, for them, but they found it cost the authority quite a lot of money when the Chief Constable went to the Employment Tribunal and got very considerable damages. Okay. So that's not on my agenda. But I am developing a plan. I've got to, by law, produce a police and crime plan by March, the end of March next year, for policing Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And that I want to base on the things that I said were important to me during the election campaign, but actually more important than that, I'm working hard to get views from members of the public, local politicians, local groups, neighbourhood watches, community groups, officers and staff who work for the police, but tonight from you, in fact anyone and everyone who has an opinion then give it to me via a survey which has got some publicity in the last week or so. And I've brought with me some cards tonight which set out how you can, there are enough for everyone, you can, and I please ask you to, tell me what it is you think is important in terms of what you want the police here to do or not to do. What should be the priorities? Now I'm determined it will reflect your views and what's important and how the plan will meet needs and expectations. But I really do want your input into that. Now I have to be realistic. The last government's cut the spending for the police hugely. The number of police officers and police staff that there are down by about 20% in Leicestershire because the budget cuts were so great. So I don't have as much money, of course I don't have as much money as I would like to do the things I want to do, but I have much less than I ought to be able to have when we had a decent budget for the police. So we have to allocate the money, officers and staff and other resources in perhaps more effective ways sometimes. The four things that are going to be the basis of my plan are 4 V's, I can call them that. One is vulnerability, dealing with vulnerability. That is absolutely crucial, and I hope an organisation like this would support that. And that would include something about advice, which I'll come on to. Other is victims. We must agree that victims should get a better deal than they do. Thirdly is value for money. It's very important. It's a public service. You don't want to waste money if you possibly can. But value for money in difficult times. The 4 V's is how it's going to be. I think people want to see more neighbourhood policing, police officers about. I think they want to see those who are vulnerable supported and protected. They want to see budgets producing good value for money, and they want to see that victims of crime receive an appropriate level of care. What do you think? I'm interested to hear what you have to say and what you think about that. So my police and crime plan next year will set out those priorities and objectives for policing. I want to see the Chief Constable working alongside those organisations that I commission to actually achieve things. I do work closely with the police, the Leicestershire Police, for all their faults, and they do have faults, my goodness, this organisation knows that, are, I think, a much improved police force over any period of time you want to consider. I think the police 20, 30 years ago were extraordinarily unsatisfactory to every group, really. I think they really were. I think now things have changed to a large extent, but I don't see my role as just defending the police for the sake of defending the police.
No,
where they've done a good job, I'm going to say so. And I think we should as a group, you should as a group. Where they haven't, I want to be a critical friend, and I think that's not a bad role to have to play. The budget, let me just tell you quickly about the budget. 170.8 million is the budget. Of that, local council taxpayers contribute about 55 million, approximately a third of that amount. The government grant, of course, is much lower than it used to be. I have the power to precept, that's the 55 million, that's up to 1.99%, 2%. I can do that. I've made it clear it's my intention to, every year I'm in office, to precept. If I want to get the things done that I think need to be done, I can't rely on the government that's actually reducing the amount of government grant each year. Otherwise I'm going to have less police officers, they're going to be able to do less of valuable work. One of the questions on my questionnaire relates to how many people are willing to pay towards, how much people are willing to pay towards policing. So I'd be interested to know what your views on that are. Now, my job is more than just the person in charge of the purse strings. It's a very busy, varied job, as I'm finding very much so in the first few months in this job. I don't think I quite anticipated quite how hard work it would be. Everyone expects the police will tackle the major incidents, we all know that, and they do a pretty fantastic job as far as that's concerned. But one of the really worrying things is the value we place as a society on crime figures. We seem to believe that the figures that we're given on reported crime are accurate. For some offences they are, but you all know that for offences like domestic violence, for offences like race crime, for actually lesser offences but serious ones like antisocial behaviour, the amount of reporting that is actually done is nothing compared to the number of offences that are serious or not so serious that are committed. Every domestic violence offence is serious. Every hate crime is serious. So please don't believe. Governments of all complexions have tried to persuade you that crime comes down under their watch. Police forces try and do it all the time. Just be wary, be sceptical about that. So when we have extra reported domestic violence offences, I don't consider that to be a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. If women, and women in particular, not just women, but women for the vast majority, come forward and are prepared to come forward, which isn't an easy thing to do, and talk about their experiences and complain, that's good. That number should go up. Because we all know, don't we, that the reality is that it happens much, much more than it's reported. And the same is undoubtedly true about hate crime. People have to put up, for all kinds of reasons, their colour, their creed, whether they're disabled or not, their age, their gender, with activities that are either crimes or at least hate incidents. And this isn't something I don't think the police are very used to dealing with, and something that I think we all need to use much more. Now, post-Brexit, I think there is an argument for saying that undoubtedly Brexit has loosened people in a way that is extremely unfortunate. People feel freer to say and do things that they wouldn't be allowed to get away with before that, in my view, absurd decision, that absurd vote took place. I said I'd never mention it again, but I have. And we have seen a rise in hate crime, there's no doubt about it. Perhaps not as much in Leicester and Leicestershire as in some other places, but that's not much comfort to any victim of hate crime. So I hope TREC will continue to be absolutely vigilant about hate crime and advise people to go to the police, either themselves or via somebody else, when that, if and when that happens. There are other hidden crimes too: sexual violence crimes, cybercrime, which is another subject altogether, forced marriages, etc. The list goes on. So for me, this is an exciting job. I'm the first non-conservative Police and Crime Commissioner for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, and I have to tell you that those who live in parts of Leicestershire, and certainly those who live in Rutland, are not used to having a non-conservative in a position like this. It doesn't necessarily make it terribly easy for me all the time. I'm having to deal with Conservative councillors all the while, because I deal very close to local authorities, and I have to tell you, some of them are absolutely excellent. And you know, their politics may be wrong, but they're after the kind of thing that you and I would be after too, I think. And then I have the undoubted pleasure of dealing with the City Council in Leicester, and it is a pleasure. It is a pleasure. It is a pleasure, even though criticisms too can be made. I think getting involved has been very important. Antisocial behaviour in Countersthorpe, for example, meant that I wasn't just someone involved in the city and not interested at all in what goes on outside the city. The work I've done with the Chief Constable on post-Brexit hate crime. There's a wonderful project called Braunston Blues. I don't know if anyone's heard of Braunston Blues. It's a superb project where the police, the fire service, the City Council and the health service, when it's up and running properly.
Ambulance service. And
the ambulance service too, thank you, yes, the ambulance service. The point is that there are people in an area who make countless 999 calls, 101 calls, particularly 999 calls, and it becomes a kind of way of life, and a lot of them aren't necessary. And so on the basis of that, these people are called on, are helped in every way that they possibly can be. It's kind of a peg to hang on some real advice and help, people who actually need advice and help. So it's one of those things that I put some money for, or my predecessor did, and I undoubtedly, I'm sure, will be doing it too. What I do is scrutinised by the police a police and crime panel that looks at what I do. So I can't just do anything I want. They can certainly reprimand me if necessary. Now I want to talk about two things before I sit down and answer questions. The two things that trouble me. One is we're still in a position, Surinder mentioned this, where the number of ethnic minority police officers is ridiculously low. And it's low in Leicestershire too. I'm convinced there is no institutional racism. There was, undoubtedly, I'm sure, in police forces up and down the country, and there may be some still, but not, I don't think, here. But the truth is, for various reasons, there aren't sufficient ethnic minority police officers for a community like Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And it isn't just numbers, it's also about seniority as well. It's not necessarily an easy nut to crack. There is a reluctance sometimes too from ethnic minority kids to want to join something like the police force that up until recently did not have a deserved reputation. I think things are changing, but one of the challenges I've got is to try and increase that percentage. I think it's worth doing if we want to live in a better society. And the second, and I'll sort of come to a finish with this, is this whole issue of advice. You ring the police 999, and the emergency services 999 in an emergency. But there's also the other phone number, 101. What is 101? It's a very widely used number. People ring the police, and they ring up about they make some minor offending, or something that isn't quite offending, that distresses them. They ring up for all sorts of reasons. Some of them nothing to do, really, with the police whatsoever. I've already commented on how the advice services have been absolutely struck down by LASPO, by legislation. It's much more difficult now for people to get the advice they need, when they need it, which is early. My most ambitious plan in my police plan is going to be to try and get an element of advice about other issues as a result of 101 calls. It's not to take away City Council, County Council's own lines, but there are a lot of people who ring 101 from all around the area. And if they're ringing up about something and it's a problem for them, why shouldn't there be someone sat where that call is taken who is able to advise them either on the issue or put them in the right direction? We should be working together. Local authorities, the police, all of us should be working together. We shouldn't be in our own silos, because the people who lose out then are the people who need the help. And that is something I feel very strongly about, and hope that I'll be able to achieve that at the time, in due course, in my plan. Now I want to end. Well, I looked for jokes about the police, but I think the one I found, the only one I found, I want to end with it. I think it's more subtle than it sounds. This is about a teacher in a local school who's requires his class to write an essay on the police. And a young lad called Martin writes in his essay these words: "Them police are bastards." The teacher's very worried about this, and tells the police about the comment that young Martin has made in his essay. So the police invite Martin to the police station and give him an absolutely fantastic, marvellous day, best day of his life in the police station. They treat him so well. So the next day, the teacher sets them again another essay on the police. And then when he sees what Martin has written, he reads this. Martin wrote, "Them police are cunning bastards." And look forward to trying to answer any questions, and very, very good luck to your organisation, which does fantastic work.